Hello, people. Welcome back to E20 Zone TV. To my right is Jay. You know who he is. And we're here to talk about life with Lopetegui, the season so far, and more. Jay, how are you doing?
All good, mate. All good. Still off of the back of that lovely 4-1 win at the weekend. It's nice to go into the international break for the first time this season. Feeling pretty relaxed. How are you, mate?
Yeah, I would say relaxed. I feel a bit more at ease than I did come Saturday at 2:30 when before building up to that game. Now, don't get me wrong, we needed the result, but we also needed the performance on Saturday, and we got it. So that's good. But we're here to talk about the season so far. How do you assess it for you so far?
I think the word I just used there is probably the best way to put it. We're 7 games in. We're 12th with 8 points. I know that obviously we talk every week about the current state of affairs at West Ham. We were promised this new era, this exciting European approach. And I'm sure we'll go through the season so far, but it fell a bit flat in the first couple of games, didn't it? It fell a little bit. Okay, we were all excited after what was a cool transfer window. There was deals getting done. There was players coming in. There was money being spent, and it was all excitement. And then we lost the first game, and we lost a few games, and it felt a bit weird. But I think the result against Ipswich is the perfect sort of bookends to what I'd call like the first part of the season. That feels like the opening act is done. We've had our have your time to get used to each other, have your time to feel out the new tactics. There's no real surprises now in terms of the way that we set up for games. The unknown quantities of players we've signed from Europe that haven't played in the Premier League, we know what they're all about now. So pretty relaxed, mate. I think 12th is probably about fair and about where I'd say, look, for the first part of the season, I feel okay about it, to be honest.
I am at ease for now. You know what I mean? I think that result made me feel at ease on Saturday night. Yeah. I think the next 4 games are massive for West Ham as a whole. Spurs, Manchester United, then you got Forest away who are playing pretty well at the minute, and then you got Everton in there and all. Now, I expect something back from West Ham come the Spurs game, because I think we all know the Spurs game is going to be massive to a point, but we will talk about that later on. Let's start off from the beginning. Obviously, we had a pre-season. We go into the game with Villa. What did you make of that game with Villa?
Came into the Villa game as Betway Cup champions. Delighted. First bit of silverware under Lopetegui. I mean, we cast our mind back to what was a weird game. We had Souček playing in this advanced role. It was a bit all over the shop. We had players who weren't fit, players who had just come back from the Euros. We had a very undercooked Jared Bowen thrown in on the right-hand side. And that man, he who shall not be named until later in this video, come back to haunt us and ultimately sunk us. We had our first experience of Souček in that advanced role and then missing a sitter in a 90th minute. As far as I'm concerned, I remember saying before the season that those first 3 games of Villa, Palace and City, I wouldn't have been surprised if we got nothing from. So it was disappointing to lose to Villa, but you cast your mind back now when we were undercooked. We had Guido Rodriguez, who hadn't had a full pre-season and started in defensive midfield. It was painful to lose, but not the end of the world, I would say.
That game still irritates me to a point. It still does. First half, we was outplayed for about 35 minutes of that game, and we could have easily been 3-0 down. We get the penalty, we get it to level. Half time, I'm expecting him to make changes. He didn't make no changes, right? Yeah. Which I was shocked about. Second half, we come out and we was all right. We was all right all the way up to the substitutions of Paqueta and Bowen. And I know they had just come back and everything, but it was like, this is key now. We're in this game. Are you prepared to lose this game like this? Then obviously the man at the moment, the man we chased for ages, Mr. John Duran, the man who's now signed a new contract, which is, thank God for that. That's what I'm going to say. Right, and we will speak about that in a minute. But that game, listen, the season's not going to be defined by Villa at home. But I do feel that game could have springboarded us on if we would have got something from that. What do you make of it with John Duran situation over the summer? And now it's ended with his contract being signed.
Yeah, we can touch briefly on this because I'm happy this has been put to bed now. There was a lot of there seems to be a lot of animosity towards our technical director Tim Steiden for like whatever reason. It seems to be fashionable to want to like point fingers at certain people for our hopes and dreams not being achieved and us not having the perfect lineup and not having this, not having that. Ultimately, this kind of shows me that whilst we have leaks that come out of our club, other clubs don't. And these conversations between Duran and Villa were obviously happening the whole way through the summer. He's a 20-year-old kid who's literally got the world at his feet. He had West Ham and Chelsea both looking at him. He had clubs around Europe. He had Saudi clubs. Ultimately, he wants two things. He wants to be playing at a high level when he wanted a payday. And ultimately, whilst we could have given him a payday, we'd have had to shell out 40 million quid, pay him 100 and something grand a week. Whereas Villa can just sit there and go, we've got Champions League football. You're the future striker of this club. Yes, you're going to have to be patient. How much money do you want? Easy, done. So as far as I'm concerned, we identified a really, really good striker. We tried to get him. We didn't get him. At the time, I remember thinking 40 mil was steep for a bloke who'd scored a handful of Premier League goals. Hindsight's 2020. He never played for us. He probably never will. Like, ultimately, it's time for us to all move on. The only thing I take away from this is whilst our talent ID was good in this respect, come a year too late. He signed from Chicago Fire for £18 million. Now, that is an unbelievable signing for a player who's now worth upwards of 60, 70 million, do you reckon? Like, ultimately, he's going to go on to be top quality. So you look at what we've done, and again, there was fingers pointed towards, well, we didn't sign Duran, instead we signed Fulkrug and Luis Guilherme. Well, Guilherme is our 20 million 18-year-old who we've signed from Brazil, similar to John Duran. No one's ever heard of him. Hopefully, in 2 years' time, we're sitting here going, what an investment 20 mil Luis Guilherme was, and now he's a 70, 80 mil player. So, look, hindsight's 2020, as I say. We can all put this to bed now. People can stop crying online every time he touches the ball and scores a goal and whatever. Like, it's done. He was never ours. He never will be. Just hopefully he never scores against us again.
Yeah, I actually agree. The only thing I will say, what you've said is very true, because that's what I've taken away from it, is we're shopping at Harrods instead of shopping at Aldi. Do you know what I mean? We are looking at talent rather than players that are just a name. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think the players that we've missed out on, don't get me wrong, we've missed out on them, but we're shopping in that market, which is also a good thing. So listen, it is what it is. He won't be the last player to come through like West Ham sod up in the market. And listen, if it wasn't meant to be, it just simply wasn't meant to be. Crystal Palace next game. What did you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, we look back at that 0-0 at half time. It was a basketball game in the first half, wasn't it? It was just back and forth. And we were lucky not to be behind at half time. But it was the ultimate away performance in the second half. It weren't pretty, but we introduced Aaron Wan-Bissaka. He made his debut for the club. He looked absolutely fantastic. The way he picked that ball up for, I want to say, Souček's goal and drove forward down the right-hand side, created that counter-attack. We go through and score. Max Kilman showed us that he is the 40 mil signing that we hoped he would be and more. He had a fantastic game and got the assist for Jared Bowen's goal. And we come away with a 2-0 win. And ultimately, the manner of the 2-0 win wasn't great. The football wasn't pretty. We still had Souček playing in the 10, but you can't not going away in a London derby and coming away with 2 goals and a clean sheet. So ultimately, great result. And that is the one that we didn't necessarily expect that we really needed in that first sort of 3 or 4 games.
Yeah, I agree. That game still sticks in my memory. First half, we were lucky to go in at half time 0-0. They hit the crossbar with Eze. We had half chances, but they had better chances than us. He makes subs in the 60th minute. He takes off Antonio and Sufal, brings Wan-Bissaka and Fulkrug on. Within about 4 minutes, we score a goal. Souček scores, and then obviously Jared Bowen scores from a good counter-attacking move from Max Kilman. I think that was the game where I looked at Max Kilman and I thought, you know what, he might be actually all right. Do you know what I mean? He looked pretty composed coming out of the back. Passing was very good. So, yeah, Crystal Palace is always a tough game, I'm going to be honest. But to go there and win was great. What's the next one on the hit list, Jay?
We could briefly touch on Bournemouth in the Cup. Obviously, we're no longer in that Cup. We won 1-0. The question I want to ask you, the game was a non-event. It was flat. It was boring. I can't even remember who scored or how he scored. But this was the last we saw of James Ward-Prowse, at least for the foreseeable future, in a West Ham shirt. He played maybe an hour and got hooked. He was pretty passive in the game. Didn't do anything wrong, but didn't do anything great. Now, with hindsight, what I'd want to ask you is we clearly moved him out on loan and we got Guido Rodriguez in as his sort of replacement. Are you happy with that as a sort of player trade?
Nah, not for me. Not for me at all, mate. I think you've got someone who's been there, done it, and won a T-shirt in the Premier League in Ward-Prowse, and you've got Guido Rodriguez, who basically is learning on the job to a point. That game against Bournemouth was so shite. That was the game where Todibo got hooked at half-time. Jared Bowen scored the goal, but that was the goal that Jared Bowen scored from Bowen being up front, Kudus on the right, and Paqueta comes on and all and basically helps us to get the win. I'm not convinced on Rodriguez. I think the league's too fast for him, and I think he's a backup for Alvarez. The one thing I will say before we move on is I'm very shocked that he's come in and started with Alvarez. I thought he was going to be a backup merchant with him. To come in and start, I never saw that one coming at all. I'm going to be honest. Yeah. So, yeah. Manchester City, Jay.
This was a weird one, wasn't it? I felt like, again, I remember we sat here and we talked pre-game about how we should set up. And I'd said, we need to play 3 centre-backs in this game because they will stretch us too far. They'll have all the ball. And that's exactly what happened. We had Jared Bowen basically playing right wing back in the first half because we were just penned in our own final third and we couldn't get out. And ultimately, what did we go in? 2-1 down. I think we went in and were lucky not to be 3 or 4-1 down. They just tore us to bits in that first half. But this is the first time that we came out in that second half and all of us after the game were immensely proud of the performance we put in that second half. We took it to Man City in that second half in a way that I haven't seen us do in probably a couple of years, not since that 2-2 game at the end of like the 21-22 season.
Mark Noble's final game.
That's the one. Yeah. Nobes' final home game. Bowen scored 2 early on. What a fantastic game of football that was. And we were unlucky not to win that. A Vladimir Soufal own goal, if I remember rightly. But it was the first time we'd actually took it to him and we weren't scared of him. And that's the kind of signs that I wanted to see from Lopetegui early on. We didn't ask to go and beat City. We didn't even ask to get a result. But what we asked is that we got 110% from those players. We got it wrong in the first half. He corrected it. We got it right in the second half. Great performance. And you know, the loss is the loss.
They are champions for a reason because they're very good. They completely smashed us to bit. De Bruyne hit the crossbar. I think he had a chance. Haaland's second goal in that game was powerful. And you just have to stand back and applaud it because he just beats Areola with power. I thought second half we come out and we had a right good go and we looked very good and the effort in the boys was very good. Obviously Mo hit the post or crossbar also, but Haaland does what he does. He scores goals and he scored that goal that ended our sort of chances in that game. But we was never in the game. If we'd have got something out of that game, we would have stole something in the end because they well and truly deserved to beat us. Fulham.
Yeah, this was the first of this started a run of probably what I'd say is concerning performances. We were second best in every department against Fulham. We really, really struggled. And if it weren't for super sub Danny Ings coming in and saving us in the 96th minute or whatever it was, we'd have gone away and we'd have been really, really angry at that performance because we weren't in it at all. And again, that high line got exposed time and time again. And we just struggled. We really, really struggled. There was no positives out of that game. Again, we had Souček in an advanced position. Again, there was just gaping holes everywhere. Mavropanos and Wan-Bissaka are asleep for their goal and nobody decided to track back. It was really, really disappointing. So when you look at the performance, it was concerning. Again, to play devil's advocate on my own point, a place that we got stuffed last season, we snatched a point. If you can play poorly and get a result, then again, there's some signs there. But this was the start of a really concerning spell for us, I thought.
This game really irritated me. Really did. And I thought it really covered over what and masked over what was really going on. Completely agree with you. Outplayed, outdone for the whole game up until Danny Ings scored that goal. Now, I agree with what you're saying. Like, to get a point there playing that bad is a good point at the end of the day, considering how bad we was. But we shouldn't have been playing that bad. That's the only issue that I had. And there was like players in midfield. I can't remember if Rodriguez was in midfield that game, and that was the start of him looking a bit slow to a point. But for me, I was like, yeah, the points are well and good, but wasn't a good performance. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And Danny Ings coming on and saving the day for us, that just tells you how low down the order and how much was thrown at it just to try and get something. Now, Lopetegui gets praised quite a lot for using his subs. Now, that's all well and good, but there's going to come a time where your subs ain't going to be able to save the day for you. And I think he got away with one there. I really did.
Yeah,
what's the next game on the hit list?
Chelsea, the start of a very bad week for us. This was dreadful. This was absolutely horrendous from start to finish. There was zero positives from this game. Another game where we just weren't in it. We weren't competitive. We were set up wrong. We didn't look like we wanted it, and it didn't look like the players were playing for the manager. We made Nicholas Jackson look like prime Ronaldo. We tried to man mark him in the way that we did against Manchester City. Like we respected a team that we should be rivaling for European places. When I'm all for you've got to respect your opponent, but at the same time, at home against Chelsea, one of the biggest games all year. This was where I wanted to see Lopetegui show that passion that he's talking about in all of his interviews, in all of his like pre-season stuff that you saw. He talked about passion. There was no passion in this performance, and it was painful at the ground. It was really painful.
It felt like he didn't have a clue what he was doing.
Yeah,
that's where I remember that game clear as day. I was driving down the motorway coming back from Norfolk with the missus from being away, and I even said it on the preview. I said, I fancy us getting absolutely romped here, like, because I don't know. I just don't feel like West Ham are confident enough at the minute. The start was awful. Yeah, I don't know what is going on with that first goal. Even when I look back at it now, like Mavropanos, Alvarez, someone's got to like make the ground up and cover and like close the space down a bit faster. First goal's poor. Second goal's laughable. Plays one ball straight for the middle of us. Jackson is in. And then they score that goal just after half time, and the game's dead.
Another counter attack, yeah.
That was the game where Somerville got subbed, and then they started booing him.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? And for me, with Lopetegui in this game, he felt like he'd give up. He felt like he just give up on the 65th minute, 70th minute. He just thought that's it. And then you started seeing people like Andy Irving coming on and things like that. Now, that's all well and good, but it's not us. Like, we usually go down, especially against Chelsea. You don't want to lose like that. And it's the easiest game Chelsea will probably have all season long. If I'm being honest, it was that bad. Yeah. Anything else to add on Chelsea, mate? Before we move on?
Exactly the same, mate. Like, Cole Palmer didn't break a sweat. We were spending all of our energy following Nicholas Jackson around, and we left Cole Palmer unmarked. And he's proven in weeks following that you can't sleep on Cole Palmer. He tears defenses apart, and he probably didn't even need to have a shower after that game. Like, it was so easy for him. So we moved on from there, and then we went to Anfield in a cup, and we got stuffed 5-1 in a really weird game, wasn't it? Because at half time I was sitting there going, all right, that's fair enough. Like, we didn't give them a huge amount in the first half. We didn't create a huge amount, but when you go away to Anfield, this is another one where I go, look, I don't expect you to win, but I expect you to go and I expect you to fight. I expect you to believe that you can win and try and nab something. If we could have taken that game to penalties, I'd have been delighted. I would have been absolutely delighted. But the manner in which, again, we conceded straight after half time again, which, we seem to be asleep at both kickoffs, at both halves. And then just as we look like we're potentially knocking on the door, we concede again. And then Edson Alvarez decides to get himself sent off and get suspended for the following game, which still baffles me, still absolutely baffles me. We came down like a pack of cards. So again, a really, really difficult week's spell that was, week to 2 weeks, when we went from that poor Fulham performance, dreadful Chelsea performance, and then capitulated against Liverpool. Again, I don't care if you lose at Anfield, but you got to fight. And we ran out of fight, and Edson Alvarez let the side down by getting stupidly sent off for me.
I think I agree. At half time, I was all right. I was quite happy. I thought West Ham had done all right. We got the goal, got in front. We let a stupid goal in. Like, the equaliser is poor. Like,
Yeah.
someone's got to come out there and either punch it or claim it. One of their goals, I'm not sure if it's the second or third goal, is where they just play the ball straight through the middle of us, and that's where our midfield is just non-existent to a point.
Yeah.
And obviously the Alvarez sending off was big, really, because it obviously affected the next game. But in one way, it's like he is what he is. Do you know what I mean? That's what he's. That's why he's not at a big club. Do you know what I'm saying? He's at West Ham, because if he was at a big club, he wouldn't be doing them sort of things.
100%.
I rate the passion and everything else, but that was stupidity that night, especially when we're 3-1 down and where the game's going away from us. You lose your head and you get sent off. And yeah, I felt more embarrassed at the end, Jay, because I thought we'd done all right, but to go and lose 5-1. It wasn't a 5-1 game, but the scoreline will always say 5-1.
Exactly.
So, yeah, it wasn't good. Brentford.
Again, a bit of a strange to go 1-0 down in, what was it, 37 seconds or something like that, from just being fast asleep. And again, some individually poor performances. I thought we were overall in the game probably just about the better side, but again, there was a lack of creativity. There's the now infamous bust up at half time between Kudus and Lopetegui, and changes being made, a late change to the lineup right before the deadline to submit the team, all kinds of confusing things going. But the one thing you've got to respect, whether you agree with it or not, is he made the change at half time. He saw it was wrong. He dented some egos. He made the change. We immediately equalised in the game and looked dangerous for large parts in that second half as well. Again, he probably got the lineup wrong for me. We were all crying out for Somerville to start again, and he didn't start. And yeah, it was a weird one. But again, you look at going away to Brentford and getting a point, then you've got to respect going to a ground that we do not get results at. And that's the first point we've ever taken from the G-Tech in the Premier League. And again, unbeaten away from home. So you got to look at it and go, he got it wrong. He made it. He made his changes and he corrected them, which seems to be a recurring theme in this thing.
Yeah, very much so, mate. Obviously, that was Tadebo's first start in the Premier League for West Ham, and he got a man of match performance. I'm very mixed on the Brentford game. I really am. First minute of the game, we were all over the place. We're 1-0 down, and it was laughable. Like, the goal is laughable. Emerson was poor, etc. And Emerson had a nightmare. And he was one of the players who got hooked at half time. The issue I've got with Lopetegui is he's relying on his bench so much because he's not getting it right in the first place. And if he was to get it right in the first place, you wouldn't be relying on your bench. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The bust up with Kudus, people will side with Lopetegui. Some people like myself will look at it and think, well, Kudus isn't a left-sided attacker. I think that's a different outcome altogether if we don't get a positive result.
Yeah.
If we lose that game at the G-Tech, everyone will be saying, why have you subbed Mohamed Kudus at half time? What are you doing? This is not right. I think, yet again, it reminds me of Fulham. You get the result, but the performance didn't really match the result, so to speak. Yes, we was good in the second half. It wasn't great. And I think the draw was about right. I'd say so. But the performance in the first half was none and void to the performance in the second half, because we had to be better, because we couldn't be any worse than we was in the first half. Do you know what I'm saying? So yeah, now that leads into Ipswich Town.
Yeah, and a comfortable win. There's not really anything else to call it other than what was a really, really good performance from West Ham. And obviously we did the post-match, the player ratings and stuff yesterday. But one thing that we didn't talk about was the way, well, not that it's a big point, but I saw some quotes. I can't remember what the quote said, from Kieran McKenna, who did absolutely no justice to West Ham and talked down how we played and didn't really give us any credit for what I thought was a really, really good performance. And the way I kind of reflect on this, again, we had some sensational performances from the likes of Tadebo. Souček was really solid in the middle. Bowen was back to his best. Antonio, Kudus on the left playing brilliantly. You could name pretty much the entire team and say they all had good games. The question mark over Lucas Paqueta, which I'm sure we can touch on a little bit more. But ultimately, I thought we were fantastic. And I thought it was exactly what the doctor ordered, to bookend this part of the season with a resounding win. We've repaired the damage that Chelsea did to our goal difference as well, which I think was really important at this stage of the season. You don't want to be chasing sort of like a -10 after about 10 games. If we'd been stuffed in that Chelsea game and get stuffed against Spurs, which is a possibility, like, let's be honest, then, you're already at a disadvantage going into the second part of the season. So yeah, really, really happy with how we've performed. It's exactly what the doctor ordered, and goals for all of our front four as well, which is exactly what you want to see, right?
Performance was key for me. I needed to see a good performance there. I needed to see a dominated display from West Ham and the result also to match. I got both. And the thing is, we acted like a big club the other day. Like, we basically said, right, they're coming here. We need to win this game. We're going to win this game. And that is exactly what they've done. The issue I've got with Lopetegui on this game is that when everything's going well, he seems all right. But when it ain't going well, he's just like a madman on the sidelines. He's still going mad on the sidelines with certain things that they're not doing right. Now, first minute of the game, we score a goal. That's fine. Then we concede a goal straight away. And that knocks the momentum. And that sort of 20-minute, 25-minute spell in that first half, I'm even mixed. I mean, people say it was good. I mean, people say it wasn't so good. They did have a golden chance through Greaves with an header. That goes in and they go 2-1 up. It's a completely different game. Even so, in the second half, when we're 3-1 up and we look comfortable, ball comes in, Delap, header, Areola, great save. But in the end, our dominance and our class shone through, and that's what it is. That's what it's all about at the end of the day. And I think we needed that as a fan base, because we hadn't seen a good performance under this manager. We've seen bitty performances where we're nicking points and nicking games to a point, but we haven't seen a good performance, and that was an all-round good performance from everyone involved. I'm going to ask you a few things today. First off, who's the worst player so far for West Ham this season?
I think we've gone through phases, haven't we? Let's talk Lucas Paqueta, right? Because I think he is the player who is, he's a shadow of his former self, and he, like, this last year looks like it's been really tough on him. Really, really tough on him. The charges come out at the start of last season. He had his move to City all lined up. He was as good as gone, and then it falls through, and he's stuck at West Ham. Albeit he's been totally professional. He's not thrown his toys out. He didn't throw his toys out the pram when that move was about to happen. All these charges hanging over him. He's still there. He's still turning up. He's still trying. Everything that you want in terms of attitude from a player, he's given it. But ultimately, attitude doesn't win you games. Actual performances on the pitch win you games. And I think the reason a lot of people were scapegoating him is because that's what's fashionable. You have to find a player to turn on in times like this. I'm praying on a turnaround for Lucas Paqueta. He's not himself. His killer balls are not there. They haven't been for about a year. I think Lucas made a really good point yesterday that he is a victim of this new tactical setup that we've got as well. He looked good when he's with his mate Emerson on the left-hand side. They link up well. They both get the best out of each other. He was lining up on the right of a midfield three yesterday. And when we were building out from the back, he was nowhere near. It was Souček and Rodriguez who were dropping in and getting the ball, which against Ipswich was fine because their press was not good. But against better teams, those two are not the two players that are going to be able to play out from the back with our centre-backs. You need a player like Paqueta. That being said, when you looked in the middle third, he was actually really good because he was picking the right passes. He was keeping it fairly simple, but he was involved in all of our key moves in some respect, which is important. But then you go into the final third, when he gets the ball 25 yards out, he's just picking the wrong pass time and time again. Yeah. He's trying to force it. So, and that comes down to like a mental thing for me. He hasn't lost it as a footballer. He's not a bad player. He's just got a lot going on and he's not himself. So I think in that respect, you'd probably say Paqueta has been the most disappointing for me over the course of the season. But I think we also had a phase where Emerson's obviously had a couple of poor games. I think Souček started the season really badly. And similarly, as I did in a video, we talked about the difficulty that he had adapting to the style of play and to where he was being asked to play. So he's turned it around massively. And now that he's playing deeper, he's playing really, really well and has become a key player for us again. So I think this forms a part of I'm not going to say the process word, but this forms a part of what we're going to figure out over the course of this first 7 and probably the next 7 games as well, is how do we get the best out of these key players? Because he seems to have done it with Souček. Now we need to do it Lucas Paqueta as well. But what do you think?
Rodriguez, for me, hasn't impressed me. I'm going to be honest. He comes in with like Barcelona chasing him and the next Busquets, whether it is, like, he ain't. Do you know what I mean? I think he hasn't impressed me. I'm going to be honest. Emerson, I called this at the start of the season. I think Emerson might be in a bit of trouble because I think they're going to go down his side quite a lot, and he's not as defensively good as Wan-Bissaka on the other side. I think Lucas Paqueta is a player that we've got to find the position that suits him rather than suits the team. I think if you want the best out of him, you've got to give him a free role somewhere where he can do his damage from that side. And listen, the key passes and the pass that he's trying to do too quick, it's just not right for me. He's overdoing it to a point. He's trying to he gets the ball and I'm thinking, right, take your time with this, and he's like, no, I'm going to get rid of it right now. Do you know what I'm saying? So it is frustrating. Who is your best player so far this season, Joe?
I think I've got to say Max Kilman. He's been so consistent since he's come into that side. He has blown us all away with how he's played. He looks like he's been playing for that club for years. For him to have come in and game 2, us all be going, wow, he is worth every penny. Because we were all questioning that transfer fee. We were all wondering why on earth we paid £40 million for a centre-back from Wolves. Well, A, look at what he's done for us, and B, look at the state of Wolves at the moment. They've taken their best centre-back out and they are They just conceded 5 to Brentford at the weekend. They're bottom of the league and are shipping goals left, right and centre. So it goes to show, again, we go back to talent ID, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a moment. And they've got it spot on. They've got it absolutely spot on. We needed someone to come in who could be assured. Again, we were warned a little bit by Wolves fans that he's not a senior centre-back. He needs somebody alongside him who's calm. Well, we've got to found Jean-Claire Todibo as well, who has taken time to get him into that lineup. But as I said yesterday, and I'll say again, if that's the centre-back pairing that we get to watch for the next 2-3 years at West Ham, we're in for a good time. Just put a good left-back next to him next season. If we could sign someone top quality at left-back, you look at that back four, that is top quality. So Kilman is my sort of best player over the first 9 games in all comps so far. Honourable mentions for Souček's improvement as well. He's come up trumps and he's been really, really good. And probably for Todibo and Wan-Bissaka as well. Wan-Bissaka looks an absolute player at right back, and Todibo looks like he's going to get better and better and better. So honourable mentions for those guys as well.
Obviously, Todibo, I was saying for a long time that I think he's the guy that's going to come into West Ham and probably change us. I agree with you though. Max Kilman surprised me. £40 million from Wolves. I'm quite shocked how good he actually is. Like, he's created goals for us. His defensive awareness is very good. I think that relationship with him and Todibo is going to be very, very good. Very good. Both young players, both players who play a similar way, both good at reading the game. And one thing I've noticed with both players is they're not rash in the tackle. For many years where players who go diving in, don't even think about it and then get done basically to a point. I think Souček's done okay. I think Bowen and Kudus haven't been their usual selves, I'm going to be honest. But Wan-Bissaka, I would say and probably just Max to a point. I haven't seen anything else of anyone else to say, you know what, they look really, really good. So it's going to be interesting to see. Before we come to the talent ID, let's talk about Lopetegui. How do you assess him?
I think it's a really difficult one, isn't it? Because you use the word, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on this, because you use the word stubborn to describe him. And I think you're right. The thing I would say is these last couple of games, he's been stubborn, but it's worked in his favour, in my opinion. You go back to that halftime altercation in the Brentford game between him and Mohamed Kudus, and he drags Kudus because he wasn't doing what he had asked him to do. And then you look at Kudus's performance. He sticks with his same lineup, he goes back to type and he goes, right, we've had a week's training. Now you know what I want from you, or Like, if you're not going to play for the team, you're not going to play. And Kudus puts in his best performance of the season, gets his goal, unlucky not to get maybe 2 or 3. And that stubbornness has taught them a lesson in the space of a week, where we've gone from drawing a game, losing at half time and nicking a draw, shall we say, to comfortably beating a Premier League side. Yes, not a very good Premier League side, but we comfortably beat Ipswich Town 4-1, and it could have been more. So I think the stubbornness, once we're gelled a bit more, could come in handy. It could be a good thing. I think he does get his substitutions right. He's not scared to change things. He's got a lot of players on that bench who can change things, but I want to see him get it right from the start. That's the only thing. He's got the lineup wrong a number of times so far, and I want to see him start to get those lineups right. You've got big games coming up, as you mentioned. Spurs at home next, huge game. Spurs away next, and then Manchester United at home. Both huge games. You've got to get those lineups right, because both those teams could hurt us in 2 games that the fans will regard as super important. So my overall judgment is I'm fine with him so far. I know there was a lot of knee-jerk reactions 4 or 5 games in when we had that really difficult spell, conceding 8 goals in a week. But I'm fine with him. I'm still going to give him more time. And I hope he repays the faith that a lot of us are putting in him. But how do you feel about said stubbornness, and how do you feel about him overall?
He is a stubborn man, mate. I'm going to be honest. Like, you can just see it in him. Do you know what I mean? He doesn't like... He doesn't like to change in a lot of things. You know what I'm saying? The Mo on the left thing does irritate the life out of me. Every time I see him on the left, I just want to gouge my eyes out to a point, because it's just not right. Do you know what I'm saying? We've got a really good player there, and we're playing on the left-hand side where he's really ineffective to a point. Obviously, Ipswich the other day, he was very good. But if he plays against Manchester United and Spurs, is he going to be as good as that? Now, the argument is that, for me, I want Lopetegui to do well. I really do. But the problem is with him is that he's too dependent on his bench to get him out of shit when he gets himself in shit in the first place, if that makes sense. You know what I'm saying? I don't like the way that he sort of puts Somerville in. Somerville had a really good game against Chelsea, and then we don't see him again. Do you know what I'm saying? And he's getting bit part games. I think he's working something, though. I will say one thing. I think he's working from the back out. The defense looks good. I'm glad Tadebo's in there. I'm gonna be real. Because I've been calling for it for ages, that he needs to play. The only issue is a few issues I've got with him. Yeah, Rodriguez in there doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. He really don't. I don't feel like you've got a man in there who can match the Premier League intensity. Do you know what I mean? I think he's better against the lesser teams, but against Spurs, is he the guy? I don't think he is. But I want him to do well, Jay. I do. Yeah, I want him to succeed, and I want him to try and make something happen. But I think the next few games will decide it for me if I think this geezer's going to go anywhere. Because to come back from international break and you're going to one of your arch rivals, in the first game at an 12:30 kickoff, and he said about passion, if he ends up getting the result against them, then he'll be forever. He will have money in the bank, credit in the bank, and he will be untouchable this season if he goes and gets the result against Spurs. Do you know what I'm saying? So for me, I'm very mixed at the minute. I'll be straight. I'm very mixed. The jury's out with me.
I think present. I wanted to give him credit for. We were told one of the good things about Lopetegui was his man management. And to your point, you just mentioned Guido Rodriguez there. So Alvarez let the side down against Liverpool. A rash red card that rendered him suspended for the following game, where we really needed him, and we managed to get ourselves through and get a point at Brentford. It would have been very easy, in my opinion, for him to drop Rodriguez and put Alvarez in, because Alvarez is the better player. But do you think perhaps we need to give him credit for the fact that perhaps he was teaching Alvarez a lesson and going, you let the side down. We had to get through Brentford without you, so you're not going to start against Ipswich.
I think that only happens if you win. If you win the game, if for argument's sake we're 2-1 down against Ipswich and we don't get the result, people will be saying, well, why are you not playing one of our best DMs? Do you get what I'm saying? And I feel like there's certain results and certain situations where he's got away with it to a point. Subbing Mo off at half time. Now, there's two sides of the coin on that. You can look at it and say, well, he subbed him off and we got a positive result. there's the other side of the coin and saying, well, you subbed him off and we didn't get the result. Like we didn't win the game, so it could have gone the other way. So I think for me, yeah, he's showing authority. That's what he's doing. He's showing authority and he's showing discipline. The issue is how long will that wash before the players start getting pissed off with that? Do you know what I mean? To a point.
You'd hope that. I mean, you're 100% right. Like those two calls that he's made there, taking Mo off at halftime and then not bringing Alvarez back in. If he gets them wrong, we're having different conversations right now. But he's made two big calls and trusted his man management skills. He's got them both right. Realistically, we were 1 down at halftime against Brentford. We got back to 1-1. We had a spell where we could have maybe got a second. Ipswich, he left Alvarez out. We won the game comfortably and only brought him on to kind of go, right now, prove that you should start against Spurs. Because we know Alvarez will be up for the Spurs game, but he's probably been told in the background, you've got to play your way back into this side. You've got to show that you deserve to play against Spurs, which I respect. I like it a lot. So he's got the big calls right in that respect. But I agree with you. He needs to start getting the lineups right. And he needs to rely less on his bench, should we say.
I think with the lineups, I would say the one on Saturday was the first one he actually got right to a point in all the games. You know what I'm saying? I understand when people look at the past regime where the manager didn't use many subs, and then they look at this regime and the manager's using 5 subs every time. But you've got to be able to have a solid foundation and solid team from the start. I think he's still searching for the team that he generally wants. Now, I personally think he's got the team there, but he's trying to integrate them in to how he wants to play. And that's more the problem than anything. Because if you was to go through the team, goalkeeper picks himself, back 4 picks itself, front 3 picks itself to a point. And then you just got that midfield area where you got sort of Alvarez, Rodriguez, Souček, Paqueta, and you're trying to integrate 3 players into that role and also be effective in both areas, like attacking and defending. So as I say, I look at him. It's an okay start under a new regime. 8 points in, after 7 games. It ain't bad. Could it have been better? Obviously, but we will take that at present. Talent ID, Jay, to round it up. What do you want to discuss on that?
We briefly touched on this before we hit record, didn't we? And it's interesting. Now we're sort of 7 games into the season. There's lots of questions hanging over our man Tim Steidten and his squad building capabilities. Now I remember when we go back to pre-season, we sat here, we did a tier list, we went through them, and we were pretty overwhelmingly happy with everyone that we'd signed. And I kind of stand by that. I think I agree with you on Guido Rodriguez. He's been disappointing from what we kind of expected versus what we've potentially got. But again, you have to kind of now step back a little bit and look at it and go, well, we had 150 million thereabouts is what we probably spent in the summer. Can you build an entire flawless squad that's going to integrate into the Premier League with 150 million pounds, considering the holes that we had in that squad? Can you do that? My answer to that is no. And if you look at this as 2 years, and I want to touch on that phrase, like trust the process, trust the project, whatever you want to call it. For me, the project or the process or whatever, which I've said on this show before, is at the end of next season, the board, Lopetegui, Steidten want to get us into the Champions League. Now, it's up to you whether you think that's like realistic, whether you think that's doable. But ultimately, if we were happy finishing 8th, 9th, scraping around for like the Conference League, we would never have changed managers. There would be no need to spend all that money. There'd be no need to be so ambitious and go and buy so many players. Could have extended some contracts, could have got McTominay, could have got Maguire and just carried on. And everyone would have been, realistically, the majority of fans would have probably been fine with it if you're going to give us 9th place every season. We haven't done that. Now, if that's the project and that's the process, I need to see steps being taken and I need to see the right players in the right positions growing along with the squad. You're not going to be able to trust said process, I don't think, until we've maybe had 2 transfer windows and then seen the types of players that we're bringing in. I think that the signing of Guido Rodriguez, for example, is purely like a Moneyball kind of situation where we had James Ward-Prowse on 120 odd grand a week, where you could get a couple of million to loan him out and get his wages off the books, get Guido Rodriguez in, who apparently is on like 40 to 50 grand a week. So that just makes sense financially. Yes, he's not a great player. Is he any different to Ward-Prowse? Different style of player, but in terms of quality, they're probably pretty similar in their in-game capabilities. So from that perspective, I think we've freed up money to spend elsewhere in a pretty canny way. And you look at, and this is a guy who's another scapegoat, is Luis Guilherme. There's a lot of people questioning why did we spend 20 million on an 18-year-old. Go back to my original point about John Duran. Villa signed him for £18 million from Chicago Fire. Nobody had ever heard of him. I guarantee there was question marks over him. But if you want to ID top quality talent, you have to get in there early. You have to get them before anybody else IDs them. And then it's on us to try and develop him. And it's on us as a fan base to try and be patient. So in terms of talent ID, to round off my thoughts on this before I get yours as well, I'm pretty happy overall. And honourable mention for Nicholas Fulkrug as well. The poor bloke's been injured. We haven't seen anything of him. He might come in and bang goals in. And if he does, great. We're in for a really good time. But we'll see. So far, from my perspective, so good.
Right. The Luis Guilherme, if I go for it stages, Luis Guilherme, he could potentially be a top-class talent. But my issue really is on the striker front. If you're going, if Tim Steiden's here for a year, I would have assumed that basically they would have turned around and said, right, we need to ID a striker that's going to be the next striker at West Ham for the next X amount of years. Yeah. They went after a man who they couldn't get, i.e. Mr. Duran. But I feel like West Ham are trying to, have gone a bit sort of, not short, but they've gone a bit tight with this to try and go, right, we're going to get these players in and try and hopefully get into Europe this year. Because I think Lopetegui's come here to try and get us into Europe this season. Yeah, I think when you're signing Fulkrug and you're signing Somerville and you sign all these players, the aim really has to be to compete for Europe this season. Listen, Luis Guilherme could be a talent, but I don't think we needed him right now. That's the problem. And I think when you need a centre forward and you've got people like Danny Ings, and I know people love Antonio, but Mikel Antonio at 34 starting for West Ham, it does baffle me of where we're trying or what we're trying to do. Now, obviously, the signs of Todibo, Kilman, that's your defensive line sorted out straight away. Wan-Bissaka in that. If you sort of add a goalkeeper, maybe, because I think Areola might not be the guy in the future, but if you could go and get a goalkeeper who's good with the ball to his feet, and then you're starting to sort of progress and turn it over the next sort of 2 transfer windows, then I can understand it. I was buzzing about the window, but now I look at the midfield and I think, well, the midfield majorly light. Like, if Alvarez goes down, we've got no... Like, that midfield's not very good. Like, Rodriguez, is he the guy? I don't think so, mate. It might be the money ball system, like you say, and he might be a cheap option, but I think this Premier League might bypass him quite a lot if he don't sort himself out to a point. Do you know what I'm saying? I think there's certain games you play Rodriguez in, like the lesser ranked sides, probably the bottom 5 to a point. But for me, I think the midfield's light. I really do.
I'd agree. And just on that quickly, this is where we talk about, if you've got 150 mil to spend, how far does it go? You spent £40 million on Kilman. You've got another 40 million coming out the bank when Todibo becomes permanent. What do we spend? 20 mil on Guilherme, 20 something mil on Fulkrug. Like, if you wanted to get, because the man who was available, who we all wanted, was Yusuf Fofana. And he ended up going elsewhere. But were we really going to shell out another 30 something million quid, pay him another 100 grand a week when we probably didn't have that money? That's probably where we drew the line and went, we have to get someone else in.
I think it's the Andy Irving situation.
That's an odd one, yeah.
Yeah, because you've got a man now who's sitting in West Ham. He's just got called up for the Scotland national side. Yeah. He's come on as a sub. The only thing he's done positive is score a goal against Dagenham and Redbridge and probably a little goal in Austria in pre-season. If there was offers coming in for him for the excess of £15 million up to £18 million, surely if you're not looking at using him, you get rid of him. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, do you know what I'm saying? And I think the Ward-Prowse one will still bug us all to a point, because if we're crossing balls in for Fulkrug and Antonio, and that's the way we're going to play with our wing backs trying to cross balls in, then Ward-Prowse would have been ideal for set pieces and being that sort of midfielder to sort of run around and get stuck in. But obviously it wasn't meant to be. So, but one thing I will say before I hand it over to you to sort of round this up is that where we're shopping in a good market at last. Yeah, I mean, we've been West Ham fans for many long time, and anyone who's watching this video will probably reminisce the times where we've signed players from South America, like like Eastern Europe, and basically they've come over and they've been absolutely shite. And you've got a we are shopping in a high-end market, and listen, Europe is key. If we get Europe, West Ham go up another level, and I think that's the problem. Is that we're trying to get these top-end players in a side, and we haven't got Europe to sort of bring these players in. But do you know what? If he has another 2 windows starting, and he can sort of pinpoint all these sort of deadwood out, and build a side up that is elegant and looks like it can play the way that Lopetegui wants to play, then the question will have to be, where do you go with Lopetegui in that regard?
Yeah, this is the thing. And like I say, I think there's a 2-year process project, whatever you want to call it, but it's a 2-year journey that we're going to go on, right? And hence, you raise a really good point about Fulkrug. Like, he's a bit of a strange signing if you look at it on face value. But at the same time, we've got next season, we've got no Antonio, we've got no Ings. Both of them are out of contract in the summer. So you're going to need someone who's a bit older and a bit more experienced that you can probably call upon and expect us to go big for a striker next summer. Yes, we tried to do that this summer. It didn't work. We pivoted. We went elsewhere. We got Somerville and Fulkrug. So Somerville's our one for the future. Fulkrug's our one for now. Expect us to go big for a young striker next summer. Same with centre midfielder. We got Guido Rodriguez in. We kept Andy Irving around. We'll probably cash in on Andy Irving next summer. Expect us to go big for some kind of centre midfielder. Don't necessarily expect Paqueta to be there. Depends on what happens with his charges. Don't necessarily expect Kudus to be there next season as well. So you think we're going to have a lot more money, hopefully, to spend again next year. And that's when I think these gaps that you're seeing in the squad now will hopefully be filled. So again, it's hard because we look at things on face value when we talk about stuff like this, which is absolutely what we should do and what we're entitled to do. There are times like this where you maybe get a little bit of a breather from the constant games and constant Premier League games where you can sit back and go, all right, well, actually, in terms of the talent that we've brought in, most of them are doing pretty well. Most of them have been good signings and I'm pretty happy. And when you look to the future, if we can then repair the areas in our squad that need repairing in a couple of transfer windows time, then, the following season will be really good. But I agree with you. If we could somehow nick Europe this year, especially I follow a page on Twitter that, shows the race for the 5th Champions League spot, and England, the Premier League is way ahead and is favourites to get the 5th Champions League spot. So, which means Europe will go down to 8th this year. Never be a better chance to snatch the Conference League and maybe go and do something special in that competition again next season. So signs are optimistic. And the final thing I would say is, in terms of judging Lopetegui and judging our season, the run in December is where we should reserve our judgments for. December's fixtures: Leicester away, Wolves at home, Bournemouth away, Brighton at home. That is your run of fixtures where you go, right, I want to see West Ham kick into another gear. And if we can come away from that with 10 points, unbelievable. And we'll be sitting around Christmas all with our Christmas dinners going, and it's great to be a West Ham fan right now. So fingers crossed, that's what we're thinking at Christmas time.
I'll be honest. That's where I think a lot of people get their judgment from, if I'm being real. When I look at us now, as I say, it's mixed. But come Christmas, which it was mad, it's going to be about 9 weeks time,
Crikey.
Which is mad. But it is what it is. Jay, thank you very much for
Pleasure.
Doing this video with us, mate. I really do appreciate it. Smash a like on the video. Subscribe to each one of his own TV. I might look like I'm in the dark. I couldn't get to the light, but the show must go on. Listen, I'll be doing some more content this week with some other people in the social media community, and we'll be talking a bit more about West Ham. But that's been Jay. That's been me. I will see you again very soon. Peace.